The gravel cracked beneath the tires as Eliza slammed the SUV door shut. She didn't come to the porch, just waved from the driveway like I was a clerk checking her out of a motel. There's fertilizer in the shed and gloves by the door. You'll feel useful out here. Just plant something. We'll be back soon. Her husband, Evan, offered a tight smile, already fiddling with the car's GPS in the back seat. Margaret adjusted her oversized sunglasses. Eyes never meeting mine, I raised a hand, not to wave, just to acknowledge the breeze, the dust, the silence they'd leave behind. Then they were gone, coasting toward Cannon Beach with packed bags, cooler boxes, and my car keys. I stood on the porch for a moment longer, letting the quiet settle. Something about Eliza's voice still clung to me, too chirpy, too well-rehearsed, and that word useful felt more like a verdict than a suggestion. Inside, the house smelled of wood polish and stale air. I opened the windows, walked through the narrow hallway, and paused by the old desk near the laundry room. A drawer sat slightly ajar, like it had been closed in a hurry. Curiosity is a dangerous thing at my age, but sometimes it saves you. I slid it open and saw a stack of papers. Not bills, not gardening catalogs. The first was a hotel booking confirmation for a luxury suite at the Delphine in Cannon Beach. The name on the reservation, Lorna Whitbeck. My name, my identity. Next, a power of attorney form. Unsigned but already filled in, granting Eliza full control over my assets and property. Then, tucked inside, a small yellow post-it note, scribbled in Eliza's neat handwriting. Get her to sign it after lunch. Tell her it's for property tax exemption. I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply placed the papers back into the drawer carefully and closed it fully this time. Then I walked outside, picked up the shovel she left leaning against the porch rail, and set it into the ground like a flag. They wanted me to plant something, so I would, but not what they expected. The sun wasn't fully up when the kitchen phone rang. The old landline crackled like it was struggling to wake up. Same as me. I wiped my hands on a tea towel, still sticky from slicing peaches for jam, and answered, Eliza. I already knew the voice on the other end didn't belong to anyone else. Mom, our cards aren't working. Nothing's going through. Evan tried to pay for breakfast, and they said it was declined. We tried 2 others. And what's going on? I leaned against the counter and stared out the window at the garden. Tomatoes still clung to dew-soaked vines. Calmly, I said, Oh, I made a few changes. There was a pause, just a second, but I could hear her exhale, like she'd walked into something she hadn't expected. What do you mean? You made changes. I stirred the pot of jam once. Slowly. To the accounts. I froze all joint access. Put a few safeguards back in place. It seemed like the smart thing to do. You froze our cards. Why would you do that? Her voice was tightening. High-pitched panic creeping in now. We need those. We're on vacation. I finished for her at a beachfront hotel under my name, if I'm not mistaken. She didn't answer. Margaret likes the Delphine, doesn't she? I suppose it's easier to scheme from a room with ocean views. Eliza's breath caught. You were never supposed to find that. I mean, I overheard you 2 last week. I said, you and Margaret in the kitchen. You didn't see me outside on the porch, drying towels. She was silent now. You said, it'll be easier if she doesn't see it coming. Margaret said something about a facility being nicer than most. I turned down the heat on the stove. Mom, I didn't mean I know exactly what you meant. The jam was thickening. She started to say something else, but I hung up before she found the words. Outside. The soil was soft from last night's rain. I picked up the shovel and walked to the edge of the garden, where the old roses had died years ago. I waited until the sun was high enough that my knees wouldn't creak with the cold. The attic ladder groaned under my weight, but it held. Dust floated in the slant of light like a memory you don't want but can't forget. The box I was looking for was right where I'd left it 2 months ago, labeled Eliza. Documents to file. She'd handed it to me after Sunday dinner with that tone she used when she didn't want me asking questions. Just insurance stuff. Mom, updates. We're streamlining things for tax season. I should have known. Inside were 5 folders, neatly tabbed. The first was harmless enough old property appraisals. The second, less so. Power of attorney. Signed in my handwriting. My name granting Eliza full access. Full control. The third folder hit harder property transfer documents. Already notarized. The house and the land, my land listed under her temporary stewardship. Pending final title update. I sat back on my heels, the wooden beams pressing into my spine. The final folder wasn't thick, just 1 page. A life insurance policy. Dated 6 weeks ago. I had no memory of this, and yet, there was my signature again. Eliza's name was listed as sole beneficiary. Not even a mention of Evan or the grandkids. I let the paper rest in my lap. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. They hadn't just tried to take the money. They had planned for after. For the moment I wouldn't be here to stop them. A facility. A home. A place to tuck me away until everything was transferred. Until I was just a signature on a file they could bury. I packed the folders back into the box. My mind wasn't cloudy anymore. It was sharp. Clean. Almost surgical. There had to be a way to undo this. I climbed down from the attic slower than I had gone up. Each step a countdown to action. I didn't need a lawyer in theory. I needed one in person, and I knew exactly where to go. I hadn't seen Margot Wynne in over a decade, but her name was still taped to the Rolodex inside my old recipe drawer. She'd once helped me update my will after Harold passed, and I remembered her as the kind of woman who didn't blink when things got ugly. She didn't blink now, either. "I've seen worse," she said, flipping through the copies I brought. But not by much. This was deliberate. I sat across from her in her office above the bakery, watching dust settle on her diploma. "I signed without reading, and they took advantage of that," she replied. "Which means it's not binding, at least not without a fight." She opened a drawer and pulled out a few forms. "First, we revoke the power of attorney. Then we file a fraud notice with the county and block all transfers on your property. After that, we send a letter to the insurance company stating the signature was obtained under false pretenses. You'll need to do a full identity affidavit." Her words were sharp and fast, like garden shears cutting through tangled weeds. I didn't hesitate. I signed what she gave me. Every line, every page. This time with both eyes open. Next stop was the bank, the manager. A woman named Trina, who used to play softball with Eliza in middle school. "Met me in her office. I was hoping we'd hear from you," she said, lowering her voice. "Your daughter and Margaret have been here twice in the past month, but years ago. You left instructions not to process major changes without in-person approval. I'd forgotten I'd done that. Maybe Harold had insisted. Maybe I'd known deep down, even then, that someday someone I loved would try to take what wasn't theirs." Trina nodded. "We've placed holds on everything. No transactions will go through unless you walk in here yourself." I walked out of the bank with a copy of every updated account restriction, tucked neatly into my bag. That evening, I poured myself a cup of tea and waited for the sound of the phone. The silence before the storm. The call came just after 9. I let it ring twice before picking up. I already knew who it was. "Mom," Eliza said. "No greeting, just urgency. We can't even pay for gas. The hotel says we're 2 days behind." They're threatening to call the police. What did you do? I walked into the kitchen and turned off the kettle. The whistle had been going for over a minute. You left me with a shovel, I said softly. I gave you a mirror. There was silence on the other end. Then a flurry of voices. Margaret in the background, sharp and clipped. Evan trying to calm her. Eliza came back on, her voice thinner. This is serious. We're stuck here. I have no cash, no working cards, and you've made it impossible to access anything. What are you trying to prove? I sat down at the table. Laying the phone on speaker, I looked at the worn grain of the wood, the faded scratches from years of family meals and birthday cakes. I'm not proving anything, I said. I'm preserving what's mine. Her breathing turned quick. We were just trying to help you manage things. It's not like we were stealing. No, I murmured. It's not stealing when you're smiling while doing it. It's betrayal. She didn't answer. I've ignored a lot. Eliza, the way you talk to me like I'm a burden. The sudden interest in my prescriptions. Margaret showing up with contracts wrapped in compliments. I wanted to believe you were just busy, distracted. But you weren't. You're overreacting. No, I said. I'm reacting finally. The silence stretched long. Then she whispered, What do we do now? I stood, walking to the sink, pouring the kettle's water down the drain. That's your problem to solve, not mine. She didn't call me Mom before hanging up. I stood in the doorway after the line went dead, the sky above the garden just beginning to silver with early moonlight. Somewhere out there, they were calculating their next move, and I was planting mine. I heard the tires long before I saw the car. The crunch of gravel under cheap rental wheels always gives itself away. I didn't rise from the porch swing. I stayed where I was, watching the dust trail curl behind them like smoke from a dying fire. The SUV stopped a few feet from the front steps. The doors opened one by one. Eliza stepped out first, her once crisp blouse now wrinkled and stained at the collar. Evan followed behind her, eyes downcast, as if the air itself scolded him. And Margaret, well, Margaret adjusted her sunglasses like the sun wasn't already sinking behind the hills. They stood there in silence, waiting for me to speak first. I didn't. Eliza took a step closer. You don't understand. We were just trying to help. I tilted my head and gestured toward the earth at my feet. The soil was still soft from the morning. I'd spent the better part of the afternoon planting beans and wildflowers. The scent of damp dirt clung to my sleeves. You left me to rot, I said, my voice steady, but I've started planting. Margaret crossed her arms. This is dramatic. You act like we meant harm. We just wanted to take the stress off you. You wanted the land, I corrected. You wanted the house, the accounts, the silence. You wanted to rewrite me into something manageable. But I am not manageable. Eliza's voice broke. We thought maybe you were slipping. Mom, you've been quiet, withdrawn. I leaned forward slightly. Quiet doesn't mean blind. Withdrawn doesn't mean weak. The wind rustled through the branches above us. For a moment, no one said anything. Evan cleared his throat. So what now? I looked at them, one by one. The dust on their shoes, the bags under their eyes, the sunburn on Eliza's cheeks that not even makeup could hide. What now? I said softly. Now you go unpack whatever stories you've told yourselves, and I go water my garden. And when I turned to open the screen door, I knew they hadn't even begun to realize what I'd already done. Margaret was the first to snap. You signed those documents. Francisca, she hissed, arms crossed so tight across her chest, I thought she might squeeze herself out of the conversation. Legally, they hold. You can't just pretend they don't exist. I stood at the edge of the porch, just far enough away that she had to raise her voice if she wanted to be heard. I held her gaze, then pulled a folded envelope from the pocket of my cardigan. I met with Margot Wynne. I said, "You remember her, don't you? She played bridge with your first husband's sister." Margaret blinked. She reviewed everything, every paper I supposedly signed, every insurance form, every transfer. And we made recordings my testimony, full medical clearance, dated, notarized, and witnessed. I stepped forward and handed the envelope to Eliza. She hesitated, then took it, hands trembling slightly. "That's my new will." She opened it. "It all goes to the Solace Foundation, the women's shelter in Whatcom County. They're building a new facility for women over 50 escaping abuse. It'll have a greenhouse and a kitchen classroom." Margaret scoffed. "You're giving your life's work to strangers?" "No," I said, voice steady. "I'm giving it to women who know how to survive, how to rebuild, how to recognize cruelty dressed up as concern. Women who'll care for someone's mother better than mine did." Eliza looked up, her face pale. "You're cutting me out." I met her eyes and saw something crack behind them. "I'm not cutting you out, Eliza. You did that all by yourself." Neither of them spoke. Margaret looked away, pretending not to flinch. I turned and walked down into the garden. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting the soil in amber light. I knelt beside the rose bush I'd planted a week ago and clipped a single white bloom. I carried it back to the porch and handed it to Eliza. "This one has thorns," I said quietly. "Like me." She took it without a word, and I stepped inside to prepare the tea. Evan was the one to break the silence. "Let's go," he muttered, his voice low and flat. "We lost." He didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes were fixed on the gravel, as if he might disappear into it if he stared hard enough. He stepped back toward the SUV, keys already in hand. Eliza didn't move. She stood there clutching the envelope I'd given her, the white rose hanging limp at her side. Her shoulders shook. I could hear her breath catching, the sound that always used to undo me when she was little. "Not this time. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said through tears. "I thought we could fix it. That if we just explained I didn't answer." "Mom, please." Still nothing. I turned, walked up the porch steps, and stepped inside. Before I closed the door, I paused just a heartbeat. Then I locked it with the same calm I used to fold laundry. The kitchen felt warmer than usual. Maybe it was the heat from the late sun, or maybe it was just mine again. I cracked 3 eggs into the pan, sliced 2 tomatoes from the garden, and chopped a bit of chive from the pot on the windowsill. The sound of the skillet sizzling was the only noise in the room. I didn't rush. I didn't serve anyone but myself. When the eggs were done, I sat at the table and ate in silence. A different kind of silence than I'd known in this house before. Not the silence of being ignored or tolerated. This one felt like presence, like air returning after too long underwater. When I finished, I washed the plate, dried it, and set it back in the cupboard where I used to keep Eliza's favorites. Outside, I heard the SUV start, then pause. It didn't matter. The roses needed watering before nightfall. I grabbed the tin pail from under the sink and stepped back into the golden light. The days began to fold into each other like soft cloth. I let them. The rhythm of the soil replaced the sharpness of voices. I rose early, stretched my back before kneeling, and watched as sprouts broke the surface. Slowly, but certainly. The garden was far from perfect, but it was mine. I reached out to the local shelter, the one the Solace Foundation had begun funding. I told them I had space, time, and tools. Teen girls began coming by twice a week. Quiet at first, suspicious of the silence, unsure of kindness without condition, but the land worked its magic. They loosened, joked. One of them, Lonnie, asked if she could paint the chicken coop mural style. I said yes, even though I didn't have chickens. Not yet. On a Thursday morning, after the girls had left, I found a box on my porch. It was plain cardboard, taped neatly. Inside a set of gardening tools, the good kind, the ones with wood handles and brass hinges, and several packets of heirloom seeds, wrapped with care. No note, just intention. That evening, as I watered the new lavender near the gate, I looked up and saw her. Eliza stood at the edge of the road, far enough to make a retreat easy, close enough to be seen. She wasn't dressed like usual. No designer shoes, no blowout hair, just jeans and a sweatshirt I didn't recognize. Her eyes met mine. I didn't move at first. Then I raised one hand, palm open, and gave a small wave. She didn't return it, but she didn't turn away either. I didn't call her in. I didn't ask for anything. I just let the moment sit, like compost resting in soil unpretty, but necessary. She eventually turned and walked back to her car. I turned off the hose and knelt to the lavender. Checking the roots, one had spread already. Strong, quiet, back inside. I set the heirloom seeds beside the others. I didn't need to know who sent them. Some things grow better when you stop demanding answers. The local paper sent a young journalist out on a Tuesday morning, barely 20. With a clipboard and more questions than time, she stood near the squash beds as I tied back tomato vines and asked about the garden program, how it started, why I did it. I gave her facts first. How many girls came each week, what we planted, what we donated to the shelter kitchen. But then she asked about family. There was a pause, a long one. I brushed dirt from my palms and looked past the orchard, where the apple trees were just beginning to blush. Family, I said slowly, are the people who show up with clean hands and stay when it gets dirty? She nodded like she understood, but I could tell she didn't. Not yet. That evening, the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the porch in gold. I was checking the rosemary near the fence when I heard the car. Same road, same sound, but this time, only one person got out. Eliza. She wore no makeup. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid. She didn't carry a purse or clipboard, just a torn paper sack that she held in both hands. I brought this, she said, voice quiet, in case your soil needs fixing. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't say she was sorry. Didn't reach for me. I looked at the bag compost. A little damp at the edges. The real kind. Real work. I walked to the shed, pulled out a shovel, and handed it to her. Start over there, I said, next to the tomatoes. She nodded and walked toward the plot without another word. We worked in silence. The kind of silence I could live with. I didn't know if she'd come back tomorrow. Or the day after. I didn't ask. When I returned to the porch for my tea, I glanced back at the dirt she was turning. There's no inheritance in this garden. Just growth. And growth can't be faked.